Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Today we have with us Kirill Zabavsky, senior business analyst and product owner at Atlas Acme. And we will talking about preparation and passing an interviews as a business analyst from scratch to the offer. Kirill, welcome. I hope everything is well with you.
Thank you, Francisco. Thanks for these words. So, hello, everybody. My name is Kirill Zabavsky, and in this speech, I want to discuss the main actions that are necessary for business analysts or any other professions so as to pass different types of the interviews more successfully. No matter how successful we are, in order to get into the right company for us, we need to go through various stages of the interviews, and it will depend on passing these stages whether we can get this job or not. Since the topic of passing and conducting interviews is extremely interesting for me, I decided to prepare a speech about this topic. But before going further for this presentation, it was important for me to answer for 3 questions that I usually ask myself before every public speaking. The first one is, who am I? The answer can differ from time to time, but from moral perspective, I name myself as a running IT man because I love running and I work in IT. What relates to IT, I'm a senior business analyst and have an experience of working as a product owner. I teach students in IT schools, mentor interns, and create my own online courses of business analysis for more than 1,800 students. I used to be a resource manager of 14 analysts, established and supported the training program MBA department, and a lot more. I conducted more than 80 interviews and participated in more than 30 different interviews as a candidate for different projects and companies. So I'm sure that I have some experience in this topic. All other non-professional information about me you can find in social networks, so follow them if you're interested, but please after this meetup. The second question is, why am I here? My common answer is that I want to share my experience in passing the interviews in a useful, clear, and interesting way. And of course, I also want to increase my social networks, be in the position of an expert for an hour, and improve my soft skills, and of course, have some fun of escaping out from the comfort zone. But the third question is about you. Why are you here? Of course, I couldn't ask you before this meetup so as to understand the root cause of your reasons and needs. But I can do it now as a real business analyst. I ask you to write down a comment, why are you here? It will be cool to see how many comments we have, because my assumption is that you are here not only to get some insights, but also to have the ability to pass the interviews with less stress and better results. Due to this assumption, I tried to focus more on the hints that help me to increase the chances to pass different types of the interviews and share them with you, of course. Then I would ask you to see the agenda of my meetup and of this presentation. Firstly, I will tell you some information about the main aspects of the interview, that includes its types, roles, and stages. Then I will tell you about my hints that help me in preparation and passing such types of the interviews as recruitment, technical, and project interviews. The last but not least part will be about the main mistakes, life hacks, and outcomes about preparation and passing through the interviews. In the end of this meetup, I will be pleased to answer for your questions about my presentation or this topic in overall. You can write them down in the comments whenever you wish. So let's start. First of all, I want to determine with you what are the main components of an interview. Understanding the differences in each of these aspects will allow us to prepare and pass interviews much more efficiently, of course. And 3 main aspects of the interview are types, roles, and stages. You can see my breakdown on this slide, and I want to say that understanding these differences is important because knowing the different types of interviews will allow us to more accurately prepare and provide exactly the information needed for each type of an interview. Knowing the different interview roles will allow us to speak in a language that is understandable to the specific type of the interviewer. And of course, knowing the different stages of an interview will allow us to understand what exactly we need to tell about ourselves and what skills we will need to show at this level. So, and first of all, we will start with the differences in types of the interviews. Recruitment interview is the interview when the company gets to know you and you get to know the company. At this stage, the interviewer tells about the company and the position, and the interviewee talks about his expectations from the company and his experience, naturally only in a positive way, of course. Technical interview is the interview when the company determines the level of your skills and you determine the level of tasks that will need to be handled. The interviewer at this stage determines whether the person's skills and knowledge match the needs of the company, project, position or not. The interviewee talks in more detail about his experience, answers various technical questions, and also clarifies the necessary information about the department and the company. Project interview is the interview when the company or the client determine your compliance with the requirements of the project and you determine the compliance of the project with your expectations. In addition to the types of the interviews, it's also very important to point out the different roles in interviews. They are interviewer, interviewee, and employer, of course. Each of these roles has its own interests, tasks, and responsibilities. And who better than business analyst knows that understanding the needs and interests of all parties give you an understanding of how we can meet these needs. Interviewer, that's a recruiter or technical specialist, is a person whose task is to determine interview's level of soft and hard skills. The main interest of this person is to find a candidate who, according to the primary criteria, will meet the requirements of the position with a minimum amount of time and effort. Interviewee, that's you, and the main interest of this person is to show his skills and experience from the best side and gets the best initial offer, of course, for him. And the last but not least is the role of the manager. His main interest is to define and find out the most suitable candidate in accordance with the requirements, of course. In order to pass various types of the interviews, it's very important to define the main stages of the interviews, and they are preparation, passing, and finalizing, of course. Each of them has its own activities and peculiarities. We will dive deeper into them during this meetup a little bit later. As I said earlier, understanding the different types, stages, and roles of the interview will allow you to approach the interview process more comprehensively and efficiently, of course. In order not to stop for too long on common terms, I propose to move on to practical tips and recommendations that will be useful for you. And the first stage that you need to pass so as to get to the position you wish is a recruitment interview. And of course, so as to be as good as you could be at this interview, you need to understand what activities have to be done during this stage. It's not a secret that the higher position its specialist has, the less time he spends on investigation of company and position details. This was especially true a few years ago when the demand for the employees was higher than the supply. If you agree with me, please put pluses. If you disagree, put minuses. But no matter how highly qualified specialists are, we always need to investigate three main aspects before an interview with a recruiter. They are company, position, and employees' feedback about this company. With the help of this information, we will be able to talk about our experience and skills based on what we think the company needs now. This will allow us to create a more accurate list of questions that we can ask during the interview. After browsing through this information, it's very important to prepare a 3-minute self-introduction speech, list of your strong and weak sides, and list of your growth areas and job expectations. Preparing answers for these questions is important not only because they are the most frequently asked, but also because having clear and structured information on these aspects allows you to better understand your strengths and weaknesses and also be aware of what exactly do you want from a new job. And clearly understanding and accurately presenting this information to recruiters will set you apart from the rest of the candidates. We also need to remember that the interview is the meeting where both sides define for themselves either they want to proceed or not. That's why it's very important to prepare your own questions about working conditions, terms of cooperation, and growth areas, of course. When preparing these questions, it's very important to remember that often questions say much more about person than his answers. That's why before finalizing your list of questions, it's important to understand whether they will be appropriate for this type of the interview and how they will characterize you. I had a situation when the applicant started asking me about my working experience, acquainted certificates, and so on. To be honest, I didn't get the point why he needed all this information, and it made me too thoughtful than any other interview. Then triggered me some, strange emotions and strange feelings. After all this preparation, we get to the next part of the interview. In order to have a greater chance of moving to further stages after recruitment interview, it's also important to understand the main aspects of behavior during this interview. It might sound obvious, but it's very important to be proactive and optimistic during the meeting, respect the interviewer, and remember about his interests, of course. These activities are extremely important since your answers to the recruiter's questions can either increase his confidence in your experience or not. That's why I always encourage you to remember that your answer should be complete, concise, and based on specific facts. Discussing the issue of salary expectations is one of the most psychologically difficult issues, since it can often remind a poker when each side tries to find out the other side cards before showing itself. Personally, I suggest not to announce specific numbers and just discuss firstly the value that you can bring to the company. If the recruiter anyway insists on defining this figure, for me, it's better to give a range that depends on what task you need to do. After announcing the amount of expectations, it's also important immediately to check with the recruiter whether this fits into their salary expectations or not, so that we can understand for ourselves whether this is not a blocker on the path for some further discussions. Also, very important aspect about passing through different interview is presentation of your skills and experience. Of course, it's great to talk a lot about your previous experience, but if your information is relevant to the position, then this will definitely increase your chances of moving to further stages. Naturally, it's important for the recruiter to understand that you are really interested in this job and didn't just come to listen to him. That's why your task is to show sincere interest and ask different various kinds of questions. And of course, in order not to be an analyst who speaks abstractly about his achievements and skills, it's best to provide specific facts and figures. For example, use not a large team, but a team of 12 people, and not a complex project, but a project with 10 integrations and 100 functions. The third aspect of the recruitment interview is discussion of the main questions about your experience and skills. These activities are very important because your answers to recruiters' questions can either increase his confidence in your experience or not. And that's why it's very important to discuss some organizational questions, ask your own questions, and answer for the interviewer's questions, of course. After discussion of all these questions from both sides, we get to the finalization part of the recruitment interview. Highlighting the common ground will put you on the same page as the recruiter and leave the conversation in a good state, of course. And request for the feedback based on the results of the interview will give you the opportunity not only to understand your strengths and weaknesses from the outside, but will also show your involvement and focus on self-development. Of course, it's always worth thanking people for their time. The main, I think, issue here is to do it sincerely and without unnecessary pathos. I do believe that any conversation or meeting should end with a discussion of the next steps, and setting some deadlines for them is also very important because that will allow both sides to have the same picture of the world regarding further actions and not pull each other until certain dates or some certain discussed points. Plus, the recruiter will perceive you as a person who is proactive in this dialogue, of course. After finishing the interview, it's necessary to make the follow-up of the interview. It's very important because on this follow-up, I point out the main details about the company and position, the questions that remained unanswered, and my inner feelings after this interview. This follow-up remains just for me and allows me to be able to return to it during further discussions and not to store a lot of information in my head. With the help of these follow-up about the company, position, organizational issues, it's always easier to make the decision about the proposal because you see the real figures, you see the real information, and you browse through that. I usually do this and I usually create these follow-ups either in Google Docs or in Trello cards that I create for different various interview. If you know, but of course, if you know some better tools for documenting these follow-ups, please let us know in these comments below. After passing the recruitment interview, we usually get to the next one. And this interview is basically related to define your level of proficiency. This is a technical interview, of course. Despite the fact that preparing for a technical interview has a similar structure than recruitment interview, there are some number of peculiarities into this type of the interview. In the process of studying information about department, I tried to find out how many people work in it, what training systems are in the department, who are more in the department, like either business analysts or system analysts, and how long analysts have been working in this company. All this information I usually look through the LinkedIn account or official website of the company. Researching information about a position allows me to understand what skills I need to emphasize in my self-presentation and interview preparation. If some details are not enough in the position description, it's of course necessary to request some clarification from the recruiter or other technical specialist and don't hesitate to ask these questions. The most difficult but nevertheless important is the need to study information about the company's potential projects. If it's a product company, then of course it's easy. But if it's an outsourcing company, then you can either request some information again from technical specialists or look up through some information on some official websites and so on. The second part of the preparation is devoted to improving your knowledge and skills. In order to develop technical skills before an interview, you first need to determine what skills you lack based on what the company expects from the candidate and from you, of course. You won't be able to fully train, of course, yourself in everything in a short time, but at a minimum, you will have an understanding of the subject and some technical aspects that might be asked during the interview. And at least you will show that you don't know the answer, but you investigated this point and started working on this aspect. Of course, it will highlight you from other candidates. And the last but not least in this part of the preparation is a self-presentation. It's important to remember that your self-presentation should be modified for technical interview based on whom you're talking to. For example, my self-presentation to novice analysts, experienced analysts, or business owners will be different, since I understand that it's important for all these types of people to know different information about me. And of course, it's necessary to prepare our own questions to technical specialists, because during this stage, you will also show yourself as a professional specialist who is interested in his self-development, in his position, or in the company, and so on. And on this slide, and at the beginning of this slide, I want to know I want to highlight that it doesn't matter how much we know. What matters is how we can demonstrate it, especially during the technical interview. If you agree with me, then please put pluses. And that's why it's extremely important for us to remember the basic rules of behavior during a technical interview, of course. And as I told previously, when presenting your skills and experience, it's extremely important to talk about both the project themselves and your specific contribution to them. A balance between talking on these two aspects about yourself and the team will allow you to look as both a team player and an independent unit on the project, of course. I think it's important for us to immediately accept that we may not get this position. That's very important because then our tension decreases during the interview and we feel much more calm and confident. And of course, it's extremely important for us to go into discussion without sense of our self-rightness. Since because we have our sense of own rightness, we don't hear the counterpart or during our discussions, and we insist on our personal strengths, on our personal opinion without taking into account someone else's options, someone else's thoughts, and so on. I think that it's important for us immediately accept that sometimes main part of the discussion is devoted to discussing and defining our level of proficiency. And of course, if we don't know the answer for the question, for me, it's better to answer instead of just no, I don't know, say something like, no, I don't know, but I can discuss and I can think about this point and I can show you my attitude, to show you my thought, to present you my thoughts about this option. If you wish, I would be glad to share them with you, because it will show you not just a person who says no, I don't know, and is not going to discuss, to define some alternative options or discuss some important aspects of this question. It shows you just like a person who doesn't want to dive a little bit deeper if he even doesn't know the answer for this question. During a technical interview, it's important to learn, first of all, how employees are trained in the department, in my opinion, and what are perspective of the career in this company. And also these questions represents you as a person who is really dedicated to his self-development and dedicated to working in this company for a longer period. And of course, I do believe that after these questions, you will be highlighted among other applicants during this type of the interview, of course. And as it was with recruitment interview, it's necessary to complete our discussion correctly, of course. And clarifying the answers to questions you haven't answered will give you the opportunity to get the information you need to study, and will also present you as someone who is interested in bridging their knowledge gaps. It would be also a good idea to ask the interviewer to attach in your feedback or send you a separate link that may be useful in order to dive deeper into topics where you missed some knowledge. I believe that the interviewer, of course, will be pleased to play the role of a mentor and share his thoughts with you. As you did during recruitment interview, you need to define the next steps after this technical interview. And after finishing the interview, it's necessary to update your follow-up that you created after recruitment interview, of course, because this will allow you to store information about the company, department, and position in a structured way, as well as your notes, missed point is interview, of course. Then, of course, there is another stage. That's a stage of project interview, because I name it so because the most part of my experience is related to the outsourcing companies, and usually we have a lot of interviews on the projects in order to get acquainted with them, in order to embark on them. For me, it's interesting, so as to make a brief analysis of the audience on this meetup, I would ask you to write down in what type of the company do you work. Put out if you work in outsourcing company, and put pro if you work in a product company. If the stage of the interview is not expected from you, then you can perceive this interview as the final stage with the head of analytics department or head of the company, for example. Before this type of the interview, we also need to study as much information as possible about the customer's company, its main use and main members, of course. Our task is also to collect as much information as possible about the project itself and the position for which we will be interviewed. Current employees on the project or sales or delivery managers can help you with that information. And of course, in order not to confuse anything and to feel more confident at the interview, it's extremely important to determine who will be on the customer side at the interview, what communication channels will be, and in what format the interview will be conducted. These questions might look obvious, but nevertheless, there have been cases where people have forgotten to clarify these points and came either late for the interview or have no idea about people who conducted this interview with them. Of course, 3 minutes of presentation for a project interview should focus on talking about your skills and achievements within specific projects and the results that clients got with the help of your work. The list of your achievements should be customer and business oriented. Your achievements should be clear to business representatives and set you apart from other professionals. To do this, talking about previous project and your contribution to them can help you, of course. It's only important to remember that it's best to talk about more relevant project on this type of the interview, but I do believe that you understand it. While you may have a description of the job project, it's a good idea to prepare a list of questions to get first-hand information about these aspects. There can happen a situation when the position description is given with common phrases and general description, but at the interview it turns out that a completely different specialist is needed on this type of the interview. And if you had such situation, also put pluses please in the comments, because I want to understand how many people are like kindred spirits with me, because I had such situation during different project interviews. And of course, in order to be on the same page with the client, I prefer to write questions to clarify client's expectations from me, so as to be on the same page with him about this, about his perceived perceptions for this position. It's not a secret that in order to make a better impression on a person, it's better to copy his behavior model. That's why, first of all, we need to determine what tone, pace, and voice the interviewer speaks, and after that, we adapt to the same style. The best result you get when already at an interview, you can offer to solve a situation or think about options for solving it together with a customer representative. I had such experience, and believe me, this will definitely set you apart from other applicants and show you as a really proactive person. And of course, it's important for us to understand that at this type of the interview, not only client selects us, but we also select him. And that's why it's very important to decrease some pressure on ourselves and relax a little bit. The most significant part of the interview will be, of course, presentation of your skills and experience. And our main task here is to devote our words not only on what actions we completed during our projects, but what outcomes for business we gave during this project. And of course, this will help you to stand out from other applicants who usually provide just the list of activities like writing user stories, creating some diagrams, and so on. But we need to understand that creating these artifacts is not the final goal. The final goal is to bring some results, to decrease the efforts, to increase the velocity of the team, and so on. So, of course, it's very important to initiate your self-presentation about these main aspects. In order to be absolutely sure that you and the customer have the same understanding of the requirements of the position, it's cool to announce your own understanding of this position and how you perceive it, because in this way you will have no doubts about what tasks will need to be dealt with during the project and who customer expects on this project, of course. I also announced my personal opinion at the end of the interview regarding who I think is best suited for the project, and what kind of person is necessary on this project, because this will take me from the position of just an interviewee to the position of an expert who understand their requirements and provide the solutions and provide the overall vision with the client of the kind of person who is necessary on this project. And of course, as you remember it's necessary to make the follow-up of the project interview, and so as to have a common understanding with the client, so as to get some basic information about his stakeholders, about team representatives, and so on. It's better to add it to this follow-up, of course, because this information will help you to get acquainted to the project easier and faster, of course. So in order to highlight that we finished with you the discussion with about different aspects of different types of the interview, I want to combine all main mistakes, life hacks, and conclusions about passing different types in the interviews, and talk about them in more details in the last part of my speech, of course. And I want to start with my loveliest point, mistakes, of course. To be frank, I saw and made plenty of them, and I want to share just my top of the mistakes during different types of the interviews. And the first mistake was that I or other people didn't investigate the company and position details. This caused the situation during the interview when I was asked questions that, or I asked questions by myself, the answers to which questions were already described in resume, in job description, and then I had to say something like, okay, I just decided to rephrase and I decided to clarify these questions, no matter the fact that they were already represented in this offer. The second mistake that a lot of people make, in my opinion, is not preparing the questions for the interview. When the time comes for the interviewee to ask questions and he has nothing to say, this creates the feeling that a person is not interested in defining any details about the company, about the work, and maybe he's not really interested in this situation. The third mistake is to show only your activities and don't show the outcomes of your work. This situation leads to the interviewer not understanding what value you provided to your clients and companies, and therefore what value you can provide to their company, of course. The next mistake is not to have a strong self-presentation speech. Great phrase is that we only have one chance to make the first impression. That's why the lack of a clear and structured self-presentation can immediately set the mood for an interview in a not really good way. The fifth mistake is that we don't understand the goal of the interviewer and provide the information not in the way in which it's necessary for that kind of presentation. I had some interviews where applicants started arguing with my feedback and started finding some excuses for their missed answers. Such arguments may decrease just your chance to pass the interview successfully, because as the main rule of getting the feedback is not to argue with this feedback. You can either agree or disagree with that, but anyway, it's not a cool option to just try to argue about this point, of course. And the last but not least mistake is don't define the organizational aspects of the interview, such as time zone of the agreed time, format of the interview, and so on. So, but that was my top, but I would like to ask you to share your mistakes that you had or you've seen among different applicants during the interviews, because it might be not even efficient for us, but it may give us some fun, so as to see how people make some mistakes during the interviews. If I told you about my main mistakes, I also need to say about my main life hacks that provide more chance to pass different types of the interviews. The first life hack is to sit in a confident position for 5 minutes before the interview. For example, I lounge on my desk chair and put my feet up on the chair and up on the table even. I don't know a more confident position than that. That might seem strange, but our sensation usually comes from the body. And if we bring the body into a confident state, then our sensations will change greatly. Try it and see that it really works. The next life hack that I usually use is to ask for the feedback about the company from its ex-employees. This information helps me to find out the pitfalls of the potential position and compare my personal feelings with the employees' feedbacks, of course. The third life hack that I want to share with you is very important from my opinion, because it's the task to find a recruiter who can help you to explore the job market. Having such an assistant will allow you to look more adequately at the labor market, as well as understand what specialists are needed now and what salaries are currently common from the person with your experience. Without having the list of your professional achievements, it's very complicated to present yourself in a structured and concise way. Then I ask you also to think that having such a list of these skills and achievements may increase your self-confidence during the interview. That, of course, will help you in passing through the stages. The next life hack is to tell about your experience based on the company's expectations and requirements. It's not a secret that the seller's task, like a sales manager, is to find out the need first, and based on it, present the product to the client. And no matter how rude it may sound, we also sell ourselves at every interview. And so as to sell ourselves with the high check, it's important for us to show how we can solve the company needs, of course. No matter how harshly we speak, for me it's important to highlight, it's also important for us to demonstrate our proactivity, not only in words, but also in deeds. This proactivity can be in asking counter questions, finding common solutions together with the interviewer, and demonstrating your experience through facts and not just opinions. The last but not least life hack is to have savings for at least 6 months of your jobless life. To be honest, nothing increases my level of self-confidence at an interview more than understanding that I can live without work for half a year or even more. This understanding gives me a feeling of confidence and readiness to hear no during any type of interview. If you have your own life hacks for passing the interview, I would be asking you to share them with us also, and discuss them maybe after this meetup and so on. So as not to talk a lot and don't repeat again and again what was said before, I would like just to name the list of the main outcomes of this meetup. And here they are. Hard skills are important, but soft skills are important even more for the interview. Questions usually say more about person than his answers. Different types of the interviews require different type of preparation. Understanding the interests of the interviewer is the key. Always know a list of your strengths and weaknesses in order to feel more confident during different interviews. Preparation for the interview is 80% of success. And the last but not least, remember that both sides choose each other during the interview. In the end, I want to wish you to feel confident in interviews and get the positions you want. Hopefully, my speech was useful for you, and it will help you to feel less stressed and more confident on any kind of the interview. Now it's time for you to ask or argue with me. So then please leave your questions in the comments. If you don't have any questions, you can just write down what you remember the most from this meetup. And while you're writing, I would share my contact details on the next slide, so as you can contact me if you wish. I want to say that despite my business analyst and product owner activities, I also conduct some personal consultation that help me improve your skills in business analysis, personal planning, negotiations, presentations, and so on. So if you need such kind of consultations, just please let me know by any of the networks that are represented on this slide. So thank you for that. Thank you for your listening, and I just ask you to write the questions and try to maybe answer them. And I will try to give you some information about them. And while you're writing them, I just try to figure out some main aspects that were noticed during this presentation. So I also see that there are some questions. I see. Okay. So I see the question that is transferred, that what is the biggest interview mistake that you have observed? So I think that, in my opinion, interesting question. I think when the person started asking some personal questions about my certificates, about my work experience, and so on, for me it was strange, just because I didn't get the point. Why did he need it? And that's why I just, if he, for example, told me about his expectations about anything like that, of course, in this case, maybe it would be more confident and better for me to answer for these questions. But in this case, I can't. I just couldn't get the point of this question and so on. Yeah. So that. Yeah.
Thank you, Kirill.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was excellent, and we have some questions here. Let me begin. First of all, let me check first the internal page from. No, not here. But I see that we have some comments here in YouTube. The first one is from Conrad, and just a comment. He said that by watching this video, I want to enhance my preparation for interview and see if there are areas that I miss it. I'm sure that is good with your presentation. But the first question from Michael. Do companies always separate responsibilities of business analysts and system analysts? What do you do if position is called business analyst and you are required to have skills of system analytics? Or, for example, the position is called business analyst and the employer wants to get both business analyst and system analyst in one employee.
That's a common situation exactly for 2023, of course, because the budget sometimes decreases, and that's why clients or even companies wants to see one-man army, like business and system analysts together in one person. So first question, because there are two of them. First, do always position have something? I can say that not always. I had sometimes experience when it was written as a business analyst, and I defined that there should be a system analyst on this position. And that's why I say that it's important to ask your own question, so as to define whether this is a position of BA or there's a position of both BA and SA. What I specifically do, for me, it's important to understand how deeply I need to work as a system analyst. For example, if I need to be a person who works with just integrations, who describes just APIs and points without any business directions, that's why then I get back to the most important rule, having savings for some period of time and say no, because I understand that if I don't dive deeper into system analysis, I'm more fond of product ownership, business analysis stuff, I choose not to go to this position. But if you define that the activities of system analyst are not so crucial, or in some case you can delegate them to developers, for example, and you can do your own stuff, of course you can embark on to the project and then move further with just your team, because we always need to understand that not the initial requirements are always what we will encounter with during the project. And if you have good soft skills, you can of course delegate something to other specialists. My perception is that we can't be perfect both in business and system analysis just because they are two different mindsets. It's not just only about the skills. And it's better, of course, to have two types of analysts on the projects. But usually, once again, we need to understand that BA and SA is devoted to one position.
Thank you. And the next one from Dragon's Luck. Could it be that we have technical and project interview at the same time?
Yes, of course. And in this case, we need to understand just who answers for what. Usually we have two different specialists on project interviews, like one technical specialist and the second is like CEO of the project or project manager and so on. And we talking to each of them, we need to use the Lexis and to devote our energy to their own interest, because a person who defines technical skills wants to know about you some specific information. Project manager or someone from this position needs to define your soft skills. And that's why, of course, in this case, it's necessary to combine and to show something in your self-presentation for technical specialists, like highlight the skills, highlight the activities, but also then add some information about the outcomes for the business that you got.
Thank you. And we have some people saying thank you for the presentation. I like it too. And we have one more question. It is okay for a recruiter to ask contacts of your previous colleagues?
Yes. And of course, that's okay, in my opinion, because they want to define some feedbacks about you. I'm not sure that during this stage it's common to ask feedbacks. Yeah, I think that's some sort of just this negotiation stuff, because for recruiter it's also important to define whether you want to get this position or you just came here to get an offer and then show it to the company. And I'm sure that if you came with the second reason, you won't give any context from your company. And that's, I think, a really cool question to define the real interests of the person during this interview. So it's up to you, but in my opinion, that's okay. And that's why it's very important to remember about your reputation and not, fire the bridges with your ex-employers, of course.
Yes, thank you. So some more people thanking for the speech, and we have no more questions. Thank you so much. I really like it, Kirill. It was spectacular. Thank you for the valuable information that you pass in this presentation. and it was an honor to be here. And to the people that are seeing us at YouTube or in the internet from EPAM, thank you so much and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.